So today we're going to talk about fertilizer schedules, and we have 5 different products here, and Har is going to tell you when and how to use them.
First, let's just talk about mangoes. And now we are in mid-November, so what would we do now? In fact, anytime in late summer or all through the fall, you can follow these instructions for the mango of any size, unless it was just planted in the last 2 years into the ground. Well, we can mention the in-ground recently planted ones first, I guess. We have the 8-2-12, which we call a full mix or a mix with nitrogen. The 8 means 8% nitrogen, and we would put that 2 to 4 times a year on mangoes recently planted into the ground for the first 2 years approximately, to encourage growth. After the tree is pretty well established and we want the tree to start fruiting more and growing less, then we switch to the 0-3-16. Now here in this grove, where the preference is to use organically approved products, we don't put any of these out except on plants in containers, which there's no claim for organic production on those. Here in the grove, Ms. Chris actually uses the sulfate of potash magnesia, which is a natural mined substance, and gypsum, which is calcium sulfate. And this particular calcium sulfate is also a naturally mined product. Some brands sell industrial byproducts. I don't think the plants can tell the difference, but there is a question about organic approval. Another thing that could be used here, but this soil doesn't need it, is the prilled sulfur, which is pure elemental sulfur, 90% plus 10% clay, that makes the prills, the little balls, the lentil-shaped pieces of fertilizer. I have many customers on different soil conditions where we see a lot of shell rock or limestone, or their soil test has shown that the soil has high pH. Then we put down a lot of sulfur to lower the pH of the soil, and that helps to make all the other elements more available. It even helps to make that excess of calcium more useful to the plant, because part of the calcium carbonate in the limestone or the shell rock is going to be transformed into gypsum by the sulfur combining with the calcium in the calcium carbonate and making calcium sulfate, which is more useful to the plant than the calcium carbonate. Calcium is the most important mineral for mangoes and citrus and some other types of plants, if you define importance as the most weight of a particular element being used. With some plants, nitrogen is the most important by weight, and calcium is the second. On sandy soils such as this, if you don't see much in the way of shell or limestone gravel mixed in with the sand, it is probably low in calcium. Of course, a soil test would tell you for sure, and a soil test can be gotten for about $25. So most of us can afford a soil test every few years just to make sure what would be the best thing to do. Both of these fertilizers have most of the potassium and nitrogen in slow release form. That means they're covered with resins or other products that slow the dissolving of the particles of fertilizer, so that when the fertilizer gets rained on, it doesn't dissolve all at once. The cheaper fertilizers, and there are much cheaper fertilizers, will dissolve as soon as they get an inch or two of rain on them. So if you're using a really cheap fertilizer, then you need to put it out often. You will plan on putting it out every month from February through November. And you'll put it out extra times if you get 2 inches of rain and you know what you put out is all gone, so you go ahead and up your schedule and fertilize immediately again. You can end up actually spending more money and obviously a whole bunch more time by doing such frequent fertilizer applications. That's your choice. Especially if you're going to be traveling part of the year, you really want to go with a slow release fertilizer that you can put out before you leave and again when you come back. At most customer locations, I fertilize only 2 times a year. Sometime in the late winter or spring, and sometime in the late summer or fall. If a tree is not getting enough from those 2 applications, we can usually see that and we can do another application to be corrective. And we might use other products for that, or we can repeat with these same products to get out a greater total of fertilizer during the year. In many cases, even just 1 fertilization a year is going to be good enough if your trees are already doing pretty much what you want them to do. You'll just maintain them with 1 application or 2 a year. I figure that it's good for about 3 months, maybe longer. Of course, that depends on how much rain or irrigation is falling on the fertilizer, and temperature also affects it. So I'm not expert on figuring out exactly how long it takes, but as I say, I'm usually figuring on applying it just twice a year. The question is, if you're only doing once a year, what time of year would that be? Probably the late summer or early fall, because what you most want to influence is the amount of flowering and the number of flowers that set fruit and the number of fruit set that stay on the tree. So the high mineralization and adequate watering will be the 2 things that make the most difference with that. Sometimes there are pest issues, and spraying for pests will be necessary as well. That doesn't happen a lot with mangoes, fortunately, but it has been known to occur some years. Most of my experience is with conventional mineral salts mixes such as these. The K-Mag, which is a naturally mined substance, I have not worked with a lot. And the question is, how often would you do that? Well, if you are into the very formal, particular aspects of organic production, you will know already when to do it, because you will be following the rule of taking soil and leaf samples and sending them to the lab, and then seeing if the lab says that you need to apply some. And if the lab doesn't say you need to apply some, you don't. In an informal organic setting, I'm supposing you would put it out once or twice a year. It is a medium slow release natural mined product. It's not necessary to have coatings to be kind of slow release. After all these details, someone always asks, why do I need to fertilize a tree at all? Haven't trees existed in nature all this time without fertilizer? Well, they sure have. In certain places. We are planting them in different places now, and we have our own expectations for them. We would like a lot of fruit, and we would like for the fruit to be big and pretty and really tasty, not just enough to get by with nutritionally. Something to grub around under the tree and eat the fruit with the worms and whatever, if we were doing everything the way it used to be in nature. So we want the trees to be prettier looking, we want them to set more fruit, we want the fruit to be higher bricks, which means more mineral content, more sugar content, way more flavor.